Naomi Reeves was 39 years old, and for 6 years she had wired $10,000 every month on the 14th, without missing a single transfer, to a woman her husband Marcus described as his younger sister Diane, who lived in Richmond, Virginia, who had a chronic illness that required ongoing care, and who Marcus had mentioned, warmly and without elaboration, exactly twice in the year before they married, and not often enough since. Naomi drove a modest sedan she had owned for 7 years. She brought her lunch to work in a brown paper bag. She wore the same 3 pairs of earrings in rotation and had not replaced her work shoes since the year of her wedding. The women in her building's lobby knew her by face and not by function, which was how she preferred it. What they did not know, what Marcus did not know, was that Naomi Elise Reeves had spent 17 years as a corporate auditor for one of the largest logistics firms in the Mid-Atlantic corridor, that she held 2 professional certifications in financial forensics, and that she had personally referred 4 cases to federal investigators in the preceding decade that had resulted in prosecution. She had accepted the story of Diane without question for 6 years. She had accepted it because Marcus told it gently, and because it fit the shape of the man she believed she had married, a man who cared for his family, who did not abandon people who needed him. It fit so well that she had never opened the wire confirmation emails after the first 3 months. That was the only mistake she ever made in that marriage. The wire confirmation she opened on a Tuesday evening in February was the 73rd. She opened it by accident, clicking the wrong email in her inbox, and she read the recipient account routing number out of habit, the way she read all numbers. And something in it did not match. What Marcus had not considered, not once in 73 months of transfers, was what happened when a forensic auditor looked at a routing number for the first time. What happened cost him $720,000 and everything else he believed he had secured. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The Tuesday evening she accidentally opened the wire confirmation was cold and clear in the particular way that February evenings were in Philadelphia, the sky gone hard and dark by 5:30. The street outside their row house lit amber under the old lamps the neighborhood association had fought to preserve. Naomi had been sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop and a mug of tea that had gone cool beside her, working through a set of internal reports her team had submitted that day. The kind of reading she often brought home because the office was loud, and she thought better in the quiet of the kitchen she had renovated herself the 2nd year of the marriage, tiling the backsplash in a pattern she had drawn out on graph paper first, laying each piece with the methodical precision that was her natural operating mode, regardless of the task. She had always worked with her hands when she could. Her grandfather, a man named Robert Reeves, who had run a small accounting practice in Southwest Philadelphia for 40 years out of a narrow office above a hardware store, had told her that a mind that also knew how to make things with its hands was a mind that never lost its anchor in the real. He had died her first year of graduate school, which was the same year she decided to specialize in forensic accounting, a decision she had told him about 2 weeks before he passed. He had looked at her with the particular expression he wore when he was proud of something and did not want to perform it, and he said, "Good." He said, "That is exactly the right work for someone who cannot be fooled and will not pretend otherwise." She had thought about him often at work. She thought about him now at the kitchen table with a routing number on her screen that she had read twice and was about to read a 3rd time. She and Marcus had met through a mutual colleague at a conference on financial compliance in Baltimore 9 years before this evening. He was a commercial real estate broker, well-dressed, with a directness in conversation that she had appreciated because it matched her own. He did not talk around things. he said what he meant. She had found that attractive in a way she could not fully explain, except to say that she had spent her professional life in rooms full of people who said everything except what they meant, and plainness was a kind of relief. They had dated for 2 years before marrying in a small ceremony in the row house his family had owned for 3 generations. The same house they lived in now, on a street in West Philadelphia where the neighbors knew each other by name, and the children still played outside in the evenings when the weather allowed. She had been happy on that day. She had been happy in the years that followed in the way that people who had built something real were happy, not with excitement, but with the deeper, quieter satisfaction of a structure that bore its weight without complaint. The first mention of Diane had come 11 months into the marriage, on a Sunday evening over dinner. Marcus had said his sister needed help. He said she had been managing a health condition for several years, and that the cost of it had outpaced her income, and that he had been helping her, quietly, for some time. He said he was telling Naomi now because they were married, and she deserved to know where part of their household budget went. He said it was $10,000 a month, and he said he understood if she had questions. Naomi had asked 3 questions. Was Diane getting appropriate care? Was the amount sustainable for their household? Was this an indefinite arrangement? Marcus had answered all 3 calmly and directly. Yes, she was being cared for. Yes, the amount was within their means. No, it would not be indefinite. But he could not predict a timeline because illness did not operate on a timeline. Naomi had accepted all 3 answers. She had looked at their household income, which was substantial, and at their monthly expenses, which were modest because she was who she was, and she had concluded that the transfer was within the range of family obligation that reasonable people extended to people they loved, and that it was not her place to interrogate his family. She had set up the wire instruction. She had made the first transfer on the 14th. She had made 72 more after that, and she had not thought about Diane once in between. Because there was no reason to. There was a reason now. The routing number on the wire confirmation belonged to a bank she recognized immediately. She had worked with it professionally during a compliance engagement 3 years prior. The routing number was for a regional bank with branch locations in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, not Virginia. She had confirmed the Virginia address when she set up the wire instruction 6 years ago. She remembered it. The routing number she was looking at now was not the same routing number she had used then. She did not move for 30 seconds. She opened the wire confirmation from the previous month. The routing number was the same as the one she had just read. She opened the confirmation from 6 months prior. The same. She opened the first confirmation she could still access in the archive, which was from 18 months ago. Different. The routing number had changed at some point between 18 months ago and the current period. Her face remained perfectly calm. She opened a new browser tab. She looked up the routing number. The associated account was held at a branch in Wilmington, Delaware. She cross-referenced the account number against her professional database access, which she had maintained through her employer's subscription. The account was registered to a sole proprietorship operating under a trade name she did not recognize. She wrote the trade name on the notepad she kept beside the laptop. She ran the trade name through the state business registry for Delaware. The registered agent was listed as a woman named Diane Harmon. She noted the surname. It was not Marcus's surname. She noted the registered address. It was a co-working space in Wilmington, which was a common registered address for entities that had no physical operations. She sat with that for a moment. She went back to her email archive. She found the original wire setup confirmation from 6 years ago. She compared the original routing number to the current one. They had diverged 22 months ago. At a transfer she could now identify precisely. She opened every monthly confirmation between that transfer and the current one, and documented each routing number in a column on the notepad, month by month. 22 months of transfers at $10,000 each. $220,000 routed to a Delaware account registered to a woman named Diane Harmon, whose surname matched no member of Marcus's family that Naomi had ever encountered or been introduced to, whose business had no visible operations, and whose address was a commercial mail forwarding service. She wrote one more number at the bottom of the column. 6 years of transfers, minus the 22 recent months, routed to the original Virginia account, $480,000. She added the two figures together. She looked at the sum. $720,000. 6 years. A woman whose name she had heard gently and warmly exactly twice. She closed the laptop. She finished the tea that had been cold for an hour. She washed the mug and set it in the rack the way she always did. Then she opened her phone and sent a single text message to her colleague and mentor, a woman named Felicia Drummond, who had 40 years of forensic accounting practice, and a family law attorney she trusted above all others, with whom Naomi had consulted on 2 professional referrals, and who had said once, without elaboration, that if Naomi ever needed her for anything personal, she should call. The text said, "I need that referral you mentioned. It's personal. Can we meet this week?" Felicia replied in 4 minutes. She said Thursday morning. She said, "Bring whatever you have." Real Power operated in quiet rooms. Felicia Drummond's office was on the 14th floor of a building on Market Street that she had occupied for 31 years. A corner office with 2 windows, and a conference table that seated 6 and a wall of files organized in a system only Felicia fully understood. She had short natural hair going gray at the temples, and reading glasses she wore on a beaded cord, and the complete, unhurried manner of a woman who had not been surprised by a financial document in over 2 decades. Naomi arrived with the notepad, a printed summary of the wire confirmation archive she had assembled the night before, and a folder containing the business registry printouts and the routing number cross-reference she had built across 6 years of transfers. She set them on the table in order without preamble. Felicia looked at each document. She did not speak for 6 minutes. Then she put on her reading glasses and went through the summary a second time, more slowly. She said, "The account change at 22 months is your fulcrum." She said that was where the pattern shifted from family support to something with a different structure. She said the Delaware entity was a red flag she had seen before. In cases where money was being moved toward a destination the sending party did not know was the actual destination. She said she wanted Naomi to meet with her attorney, a woman named Adeze Naji, who practiced family law from an office 2 floors down, and who had been Felicia's referral partner for 11 years. She said Adeze would know what to do with the legal instruments. Felicia would handle the financial forensics. She asked Naomi one question before they ended the meeting. She said, "Do you have anything that connects the name Diane Harmon to your husband directly? Any photograph? Any correspondence? Any record of them in the same location?" Naomi said she did not have that yet. She said she knew how to find it. Felicia looked at her over the reading glasses. She said, "I know you do." She said, "Take a week." Naomi took 4 days. She pulled Marcus's personal email, which she had legitimate access to under the shared account arrangement they had set up early in the marriage for household management. She had never read his personal correspondence. She had had no reason to. She had no hesitation now. She found 47 email exchanges with an address whose display name was listed as D. Harmon. The earliest was dated 8 years ago, which was 1 year before she met Marcus at the compliance conference in Baltimore. The most recent was dated 9 days before the Tuesday evening she accidentally opened the wrong wire confirmation. The emails did not require interpretation. They were the correspondence of two people who had been in an ongoing relationship for the entirety of her marriage and for a year before it. They referenced shared plans, shared concerns, and one exchange from 4 years into the marriage referenced the arrangement and used the phrase, "She still thinks it's family," which was 3 words that settled into Naomi's understanding with the quiet weight of a structure confirming its own design. She documented every email with a timestamp and a summary. She forwarded the 47 threads to a secure account. She noted the dates, the account name, the pattern of contact. 47 threads. 8 years. A woman named Diane, who was not a sister, and had never been a sister, and had received, across 6 years of monthly transfers, 600 years of her husband's practiced consideration. Her hands did not shake. She drove to her Uncle Raymond's house that evening. Raymond Reeves was 73 years old, her grandfather's son, a retired tax attorney who had practiced in Philadelphia for 35 years and who still kept his old client files in the basement in accordion folders he had organized by year in her grandfather's system. He was a small man with the same steady hands and the same way of listening all the way through before he spoke. She told him everything. He listened for 22 minutes. He asked 2 questions. The first was whether she was certain the emails were authentic and not something that could be argued as fabricated. She said the headers were intact and the account was verified and she had the full chain of custody documented. He said good. The second question was whether she had spoken to Marcus. She said no. She said she was not going to. He nodded. He said her grandfather used to say that a good auditor never revealed the finding before the report was final. He said he thought she already knew what that meant for this situation. She said she did. She drove home and made dinner. She set the table. She asked Marcus about his week, and he talked for 20 minutes about a commercial property he was close to closing, and about the cold front that was supposed to move through by the weekend. She listened with the portion of herself that was still present at that table, and the rest of her was already in a Daisy's office on Friday morning, already past this kitchen, already building. Adeze Naji practiced in a clean, spare office 2 floors below Felicia's, the walls holding nothing but a framed print of a single botanical and her degrees in matching frames. She was 38 years old and had been practicing family law for 12 years and had the focused efficiency of someone who respected the weight of the work enough to never perform around it. She reviewed the wire confirmation archive, the routing number analysis, the business registry documents, the email summary, and Felicia's preliminary forensic findings in 90 minutes. She said she saw a clear basis for a dissipation claim under Pennsylvania law covering the full $720,000 in transfers, on the grounds that marital assets had been diverted to a third party in the context of an undisclosed ongoing relationship. She said the Delaware entity registration and the routing account change at 22 months would be documented as evidence of a deliberate structure designed to obscure the destination of the funds. She said the email correspondence established both the relationship and Marcus's awareness of what he was concealing. She said she would be ready to file within 2 weeks. Naomi asked about Marcus's assets outside the marriage. Adeze said Felicia had already begun tracing them. She said there were 3 accounts Marcus held independently and 1 commercial real estate investment registered in a limited liability company she had not yet fully unwound. She said by the time they filed, the picture would be complete. She said one more thing. She said she wanted to prepare Naomi for the possibility that Marcus would be genuinely surprised that she had found this. She said in her experience, men who ran arrangements like this one relied on the assumption that the person they were deceiving was not looking. She said the look on their face when they understood that she had been looking all along was always the same. Naomi said she understood. She said she had spent 17 years in rooms where people believed they had hidden things that she could see from across the table. The reckoning happened on a Saturday morning in late March, at the row house on the West Philadelphia street where Marcus's family had lived for 3 generations, the same house where they had married, where Naomi had tiled the kitchen backsplash by hand, where the neighbors knew them both by name. Marcus had been told by his attorney, a man named Howard from a firm in Center City, that there was a legal matter requiring his attention at home that morning, and that Naomi's attorney would be present. He had come downstairs in the expectation of a difficult conversation and found Adaize and Felicia seated at the kitchen table he had eaten at every morning for 9 years, and Naomi across from him, and the table between them laid with printed documents the way a table was set for a meal she had prepared carefully and in full. Adaize walked through the documents in order: the wire confirmation archive, the routing analysis, the Delaware entity registration, the 47 email threads summarized and printed with their timestamps, Felicia's forensic accounting summary, 19 pages, documenting $720,000 in transfers across 73 months, with a 22-month account shift flagged and annotated. Marcus looked at the documents. He looked at Naomi. He said he could explain. Adaize said he was welcome to explain at deposition. He tried once more. He looked at Naomi with the voice that had always been the most reliable thing about him. The plain, direct voice she had found so different from everything else she encountered, and he said she had to understand that this was complicated, that Diane was someone he had known a very long time, that he had never meant for it to go the way it did. Naomi looked at him evenly across the table she had eaten at for 9 years. She said, "You used the word sister because you knew I would not question family." She said she had asked herself why that specific word, and that was the only answer that made sense. She said she wanted him to know that she understood the precision of it. She said it was a well-constructed story. She said, "I spent 17 years finding the things people were certain they had hidden. I was never not going to find this. You just thought it would take longer." She stood. She picked up her bag. She nodded to Adaize and to Felicia. She walked out through the kitchen door and onto the small back porch where the potted rosemary still held from last autumn, and stood for a moment in the cold March air. She did not look back at the kitchen. 11 months later, Naomi Elise Reeves lived in a townhouse she had purchased in the Mount Airy neighborhood of Philadelphia, a house with a narrow backyard she had already begun terracing with raised beds, laid in the same pattern as the kitchen tile she had left behind. Because some methods were worth keeping even when everything around them changed. She had left the tile. She had kept the method. The settlement had been finalized in August after 6 weeks of mediation. The $720,000 in transferred assets was documented in full and credited to Naomi's share of the marital estate. The commercial real estate investment in the LLC had been valued at $380,000 at the time of filing, of which Naomi received her equitable portion. The row house had been listed and sold, and the proceeds distributed. The total settlement was the most she had seen come out of a case she had not personally litigated, and she had seen a considerable number of cases. She had also received, 3 months after the filing, a referral from Adaize to a federal compliance office regarding the Delaware entity and its registered agent, Diane Harmon, whose business registration documents contained several representations that were, according to the compliance investigator who called Naomi for background, difficult to reconcile with the available evidence. She had provided what she knew and let that process move at its own pace. She did not follow it closely. It was someone else's audit now, a man named Vincent, a landscape architect who had bought the townhouse 2 doors down the previous spring and who had noticed the terracing work she was doing in the backyard, had knocked on her gate one Saturday morning to ask what soil amendment she was using. The conversation had lasted 2 hours and migrated from the backyard to the porch to the inside of the house and to a cup of tea that she had made and he had not expected to be offered. He was a quiet man with the professional habit of seeing the ground before deciding what to put in it, which she had found, without intending to, a quality she recognized. Marcus had vacated the row house in September. He had listed a commercial property in October that had not sold. 2 clients he had built his practice around had moved to other brokers, a development she heard about from a former colleague who mentioned it without apparent awareness of the context, and which she registered without gloating. Diane Harmon had closed the Delaware entity in November. Naomi knew this because business registry changes were the kind of thing she still checked by habit. The way she read routing numbers, the way she organized files in a system that only she fully understood. On a Saturday morning in February, 11 months and 2 weeks after the March reckoning, Naomi was in the backyard with her hands in the soil, setting the last of the early season seedlings into the raised beds she had built herself from reclaimed cedar, working in the methodical row-by-row method she had learned from watching her grandfather work through a problem, which was to start where you had the most information and move steadily toward what you did not yet know. The beds were in good order. The soil was right. The seedlings were small and undramatic and full of the particular promise of things planted correctly in the right season. She pressed the last one in. She sat back on her heels and looked at the row. She thought of her grandfather at his narrow desk above the hardware store, reading a column of numbers the way other people read a story, finding the thing inside them that didn't belong, setting it apart, and asking why. She had learned everything she needed from watching that. Freedom was the real currency. She had audited her way back to it, and every cent of the return was documented. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.